Have you ever been romantically involved with a sociopath, ASPD diagnosed? If so, is it actually a traumatizing experience? What is it like? I had a friend who married one. He changed 100% the night they got married. He went from a nice normal guy to super cold. He moved her out of state, got her pregnant, and had 2 other families on the side. She finally got out of it. FK'd her up for a long time. Oh. Apparently the same thing happened to my mom and biological father. They dated for a couple of years. But as soon as they got married and moved in together, it was like a switch was flipped. Yes. I dated a narcissistic sociopath. It was terrible. And left permanent scars. It took time, but I realize now that everything was a lie. Well, his name was correct, but what he thought, felt, did, his plans and his history, I know none of those things. He is a complete stranger and I never knew him at all. I'm doing fine now. Although once in a while I stop and shake my head because I feel so goddamn dumb. My ex is a walking illusion. He was whatever he needed to be at the moment to reel in his victim. Even after I filed for divorce. It wasn't until I heard the pathological lies that he'd told his new girlfriend that I realized it. A friend of mine dated a diagnosed sociopath. And she said it was frustrating because there wasn't any logic behind her attraction to him. She realized he was not good to her. But she couldn't stop going back to him. She described him as both the best and worst thing in her life when she was with him. I dated a guy who wanted total control 24/7. I got sick a lot and had a lot of medical tests because they couldn't figure out what was wrong. I got really boring and too sick to go anywhere, so he broke it off. I don't imagine that it's common for sociopaths to get diagnosed as such. They tend to live in denial. They don't think they have issues worth exploring. Yes, I dated one. And it was the most traumatic experience of my life. By the time it was over, multiple years, I had no idea who he was. That's what it's like. My first boyfriend told me on our first date that he was a sociopath, and I don't feel anything, but I sure know I like you, and because I was 16 and now then I completely fell for it. Q being manipulated into sex. Telling him I struggled with my relationship with food and body image only to be told I was flabby afterwards. And all the exhausting mind games. Even through all of that and more, I still utterly adored him and repressed all of my instinctual feelings that were telling me to leave. Something I still feel dumb about. I honestly think I was just a toy for him to manipulate and hurt. Something he made sure to tell me about after our relationship ended. The way his face would change from loving to like someone I didn't know was kind of terrifying, really. It all FK'd me up pretty badly and I still find it hard to trust people. Was married to one for 4 years. Definitely would not repeat. The level of delusion is unreal, and trying to get him to understand someone else's pain, trying to get him to see how his actions were FK'd up, was like trying to force a colorblind person to differentiate red and green. His vast lack of empathy was unyielding. Not even his therapist could make progress, and requested to meet with me for help in getting through to him. He truly lives in a fictional world where he can do no wrong. And it's f***ing terrifying. I moved 1,000 miles away first chance I got. My wife was before she met me. He was horribly manipulative and she could really only see it at the end. Not horribly traumatic, but definitely could have been if she'd been with him any longer. My greatest fear is that I manipulate without knowing it. I've had therapy where my therapist said I might be a sociopath, but didn't want to confirm it yet. But I had an ex and I was the sociopath in the relationship. It was hard, but I won't spare the details. But long story short, I did hurt him. Emotionally and physically. We broke up and he broke down. It left me weird. But I just felt pity for him. I still felt bad, but it didn't last long. I didn't want to do it, but I did. I had to break it off before he goes mentally depressed. So I made the right choice. My therapy sessions have been paused for a while since it's in school. I'm still friends with him. But it still comes out and I've been trying to avoid him. But it's killing me. I'm still trying to get better, but I sometimes think I might hurt again. And it's a 50/50 in me. Yes. Tried to separate me from my friends. Completely shut down socially when I may have been having a better time than her. Threatened to jump off a cliff when I broke it off. Etc. Luckily aforementioned friends are excellent people who told me to get out early and helped me through the post-breakup shock. Honestly though, I grew closer to my friends and my mum because of it, so it was a good bad experience. I think my ex-girlfriend did. I really don't want to talk about all of it. Because the memory of it honestly makes me feel terrified that people like this just exist in society. She was my first girlfriend. So I think she pinpointed me as being inexperienced. It's now a year and a half after it ended. And I'm still having waves of depression and a lot of social anxiety. It's terrifying for me. Whenever I look at a bunch of people, I just think about the fact that any one of them could completely FCK up my mind. Sociopaths are not necessarily narcissists. What does that mean? The average one isn't going to be evil just because it could benefit them. Remember, they have lack of emotions. That extends onto themselves for the most part. Most of them just go through the motions of what they have been taught is normal. Seriously. Borderline personality disorder. Love is blind. And they're psychotically manipulative. Takes a while to realize they're sick. Even longer to do something about it. And it still hurts when you fail and realize they're incapable of even resembling a stable loving mate. Then you leave. Somehow still feeling defeated even though it's the best decision you'll ever make. Don't date psychos. BPD is curable. Those who go through DBT are able to redirect their emotions and behaviors, and is usually developed from trauma in childhood. Please be respectful to those who suffer from this awful disorder. Recovery is possible. Looking at the comment, I think most people in the comments don't even know what a sociopath is. I was with one but he was undiagnosed. It was the most traumatic years of my life. I was made to feel like the worst person. Everything was my fault. I trusted him entirely but he made me feel like everything was my fault. He emotionally abused me on every level. He didn't tell me that he had 3 children and one on the way from a past relationship and didn't see them the whole time we were together. He stopped providing for them too for a while. He completely destroyed me as a person even though he knew we had no future. I haven't been able to move on with anyone else since because of the damage he did. Suffice it to say I looked over my shoulder for at least 15 years after the relationship ended. So, like most, my ex was not a card-carrying sociopath. At the risk of sounding like an armchair psychologist, I've diagnosed her as one and a narcissistic one at that. To put it bluntly, it's exhausting. Living every day unsure of how they'll choose to behave. Constantly wondering whether they're remaining faithful, being genuine, manipulating me constantly stimulates the fight or flight response, and living in that environment for nearly 6 years has left lasting scars. I am more defensive now, less prone to intimacy, and have higher walls. The worst part is that her tendencies became my normal, and reshaping that idea of what a good relationship is has been a battle. Love is a hell of a drug. I was in a relationship with a sociopath. Typically a sociopath will either A, not be diagnosed because they are not seeking help, or B, not wish to share with you that they're a sociopath, as they know it will raise red flags. I only came to realize it after the fact. With the help of my therapist. I was young and it was my first committed relationship. Didn't know yet what a healthy relationship should look like. Worst year of my life. I would suggest that if anyone sees a manipulative, lying, abusive side in their partner, they get out immediately. Was married 18 years to one. It was difficult. It nearly killed me. It's a living hell. You want to believe the positive is sincere, but not even that is for your benefit. It has to be positive to them. And that's all that's important. FCK everyone else in the room. I was with a sociopathic narcissist for 10 years. Finally got divorced a year ago. But because we have a child together, it will be another 10 years before I fully get away from him. The 10 years I was with him was absolute torture. I went to therapy for 5 of those years thinking I was the problem. When the therapists would meet him for marriage counseling, they tried telling me what he is. I was too delusional to believe it because he would talk circles around me. Leaving him was the best thing I ever did. He made me suicidal on multiple occasions due to his treatment. The most traumatizing experience of my life thus far. 0/10 haha. Every day you are a disappointment and longing for a love you will never receive. However, you can't just pick up and leave because you're trapped. You love them. You couldn't imagine life without them. They abuse daily, but you blow that out. Once you're free, you begin to see. Yes. For 1/2 years. My daughter's dad. Diagnosed via court-ordered psych evaluation during the course of our highly contested custody litigation. Thankfully, she and I haven't had contact with him in several years now. After he realized that, since daughter is getting older and more articulate, if he continued exercising his visitation rights he was going to be charged with abuse and or neglect. I was diagnosed with PTSD. I've had a lot of therapy. AMA. It's always a traumatizing experience. If it isn't, you didn't get close enough to them to see it. The sociopath I was involved with kept souvenirs of women he had slept with. Was obsessed with blood. Once told me he didn't understand what it meant to care about what someone else is saying during a conversation. And was expelled from my university at the end of his freshman year for raping multiple women and sexually harassing many others. Before he was expelled, however, he transferred to a new university before his records could be legally transferred. Something he taunted me, one of his accusers, with. Watch out. Yukon. I dated someone who was bipolar and also diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, BPD, who refused to take their meds and mostly self-medicated with pot. She cheated on me frequently, made a ton of very impulsive decisions, and often expected me to chase her. Literally follow after at a quick pace. Throughout my neighborhood, she would often try to manipulate me, gaslight me, and just generally FCK with my head. 0/10. Would not recommend. I married him. Why? That's a long story. 60 years later it is painful to even write this much. I know this girl in my high school. And I swear she had no regard for anyone but herself, except I didn't know that until after we hooked up. After that event, she started asking me to tell one of our mutual friends how good she was, who is asexual and didn't even like the thought of kissing. Later on that summer, she would hit me up with sexting and stuff like that. And a lot of it involved pain. A few days after that, she started talking about how she could kill me if she wanted to. Drive me to suicide, etc. That she had the power to end a life. She was also super poetic about random things, like eyes or hands. She'd talk about how she willingly walked on gravel to feel the pain of it, or burn herself. I don't talk to her at all anymore. But the image of her reminds me of that night she threatened my life as well as my friends. It was terrifying. I dated a narcissist for 3 years. She FK'd me up something fierce. Was a phenomenal actress if I'm being honest. Too bad she used her acting skills on me the entire time. Cheated on me for 3 years with her just friend that she told me to not worry about. He didn't even live in the same f***ing country as us. Told me 1,000 days in a row that she loved me. Chose me. Wanted to be with me. Blah blah blah. Literally used me as a cameraman to take sexy pictures to send to him after we broke up. And I actually thought cheating was the most evil shit you could do to someone in a relationship. I was wrong. Not really romantically. But I had a crush on him for a while before we became best friends. I used to tell him I loved him. And he would stare at me blankly and reply with, "Oh." He never cried. I watched him get hit with a baseball bat and the balls and he just sat there and held them. His dog died. He didn't cry. I wrote him a song to show him how much I loved him. And he didn't care. Messed me up big time, and now I have difficulties telling my complicated boy relationship partner dude that I love him. My sister is a sociopath. She only dates people with mental disorders, minorities, so she can constantly guilt them into stuff. Every relationship she's been in, she yelled at them, "You're only dating me because I'm white." In the literal sense of sociopath, of a lack of conscience. Yes. Chronic liar, and me being young, I didn't know any better. I ended up getting her pregnant, and I knew it was for the best that she not raise her own daughter. So in our divorce I made sure to get custody. Everything turned out well for my daughter. I, on the other hand, found out a number of years later my daughter wasn't biologically related to me. Many men, that could be considered a nightmare scenario, and for me it was for a while, and I still have trouble with it, honestly. But I am glad my daughter didn't have to grow up with her mother and only has to interact with her when she, my daughter, wants. Just wanted to comment and mention that not all of us ASPD are like this. Some of us actually identify there is an issue and want to blend with society. Currently dating one. Not traumatizing at all, actually. He was diagnosed when he was younger and it's just something to live with. He's charming and carries himself very well among others. He doesn't feel empathy like the rest of us do, but can understand why something would provoke the reaction it does, even if he can't feel it the same way. The mask he wears is super convincing, and you wouldn't know he was one unless you really got to know him. The relationship is great, but it is a bit weird in a way. I learned that my love and his love are different. And this applies to all other emotions such as sadness, anger, and jealousy. For the most part our relationship is great. It has its normal ups and downs. I try to take the time to understand him, but it can be a bit difficult. Oh my fking god. I can barely talk about it. Cost me my $250 K a year job. My $800 K house. My Mercedes. My Lincoln. $250 K in legal expenses. My friends. My health and my self-respect. Left me broke. Beaten and a meth addict. I'm clean now. But I will never recover financially. My reputation is ruined. I'm 62 and will retire on a minimum pension, less than $3K a month, while still owing $200 K to the IRS. It lasted 4 years. I thought he loved me and I thought no one had ever given him a chance. I've got to hand it to myself. I hung in there through an amazing amount of evidence. He was in the fast lane to hell and I was riding shotgun. Yes. She took pride in attempting to destroy my life. Was telling people we weren't involved, yet we spent 5 nights a week at least together. She tried to FCK with my head so much. I left her and never spoke to her again. My first boyfriend was a sociopath. I dated him for 6 months when I was 16. I let him take my virginity. Then he broke up with me the next day. I then saw him at a restaurant right after it happened by chance and we ended up talking. I pleaded with him not to tell anyone. And he did. Everyone knew. Even my host parents knew. It was mortifying. I dated a sociopath who literally waited 5 months for me to tell him I trusted him just so he could get up and leave. Complete lack of empathy or self-awareness. He had a weird complex regarding control and always talked about wanting people to respect him but being completely standoffish in any social situation. He'd gotten himself in some f***ed up situations before we'd met and was mentally not in a good headspace, but still he made me question my entire worth and point of existence to the point of asking doctors to kill me. So yay, 10/10 would not recommend dating a sociopath. Never dated one, but reading comments I've seen some people talk about some symptoms. Like the monotone voice and using the same phrases with different people, like a social script. As a sign that someone is a deranged psychopath and a dangerous person. I just wanted to point out that these symptoms aren't exclusive to ASPD. People in the autism spectrum also display these symptoms, and it's simply because we can't interpret and emit social cues properly and we just try to emulate other people so we can communicate our feelings. Which are real. It's dangerous to dehumanize people with mental disorders. I've seen some people doing this in the comments. Ex-fiancé number 2 has ASPD. We were very good at our own self-destruction. But he did care about me a surprising amount. I later realized it was because of our BDSM roles, etc. I was his. He cared about his tea until things went south and he cheated on me with his best friend's girl. We talked a week or two ago. He is still with the girl he cheated with but was hoping I was still around and single. No, I did not, but I dated someone with some other pretty intense mental disorders. It doesn't answer your question, but I can say from that relationship came me being incredibly exhausted trying to keep up with his craziness, and it became too difficult on me. I very briefly dated a malignant narcissist, which is very close to sociopathy. He killed his cat because she took a dump on his floor. I only got to know about it after I dumped him though. Anyway, he didn't even hide who he was and it was very obvious something was wrong with him. I didn't even last a few weeks with him. The day I broke up with him he told me he wanted to murder me and I'll pay the corpse. Even typing it now after so many years feels terrifying. I've been close friends with multiple, which is close enough I guess. I've seen both. Honestly. Some of them are genuinely good people who are a little too hard on themselves over their missing pieces, and I've also known a couple who were genuinely awful once you got to know them.